Hi everybody, welcome to my kitchen. I'm Andrea Buckett and today we are cooking pork belly. Now I know some of you might order pork belly when you go out to a restaurant, but you might feel a little intimidated to make it at home. So today I'm going to give you some tips and tricks to make the perfect roasted pork belly. The thing that makes pork belly super delicious is that it has alternating layers of meat and fat. So you get this well marbled meat in accompaniment with a buttery fat, and then you get crispy skin if you cook it right. So this is what a pork belly looks like. It's the same stuff that they make bacon with. But when you go to your butcher's or your market or your local grocery store, you're looking for a center cut piece of pork belly. And I'm gonna show you just quickly those different layers. So on top here, we're gonna have what they call crackling, when that gets nice and crispy and adds that beautiful texture. And then here you can see that it has alternating layers of fat and meat, and again, some fat and some delicious meat. So as that cooks down and those collagens break down and it renders all that fat, it's going to be a super delicious, decadent dish. So let's make it. There are lots of different ways to cook pork belly, but today we are going to roast it. And to start, we're going to create a base layer of flavors. Now, pork goes really, really well with sweet ingredients, savory ingredients. So I thought I'd make a bed of apples, onions, and fennel. And this is going to be really easy. We're just going to take some, whatever apples you have in your crisper, and we're just going to slice them into 3 equal pieces. You want them sort of flat on the bottom because they are going to make the foundation to rest that pork upon as it roasts. So we've got 2 apples, and we're gonna go ahead and slice this onion in 3s as well. You can leave the skin on because if you want afterwards, you can make a nice gravy, and we'll show you how to do that as well. And that onion skin actually adds color to the end jus or gravy that we're going to make. So again, we're just gonna cut these into 3 equal pieces right through the skin and get that all started. We're just going to put the apples and the onions on our baking dish here. Now you want a baking sheet or even a roasting pan that has a little bit of a lip on it because we are going to add a little bit of liquid to it. So if you feel more comfortable using a roasting pan, absolutely you can go ahead and do that. But I just like using this baking dish. So we're going to alternate. And don't forget about the fennel. We're going to put some fennel down afterwards as well. So let me just get this stuff on here and make some room on my board. And this is fennel. So if you've never used fennel before, it's really delicious. It's like a cross between celery. It has sort of an anise flavor to it, but it's really delicious. And when you roast it up, it becomes really, really sweet. So if you get a chance to try this veg, make sure you do. We're just gonna cut off the top here and cut off the stem end. And then again, just like the apple and the onion, I wanna cut this into fairly thick slabs. And as you cut into it, you can already smell that fragrance coming off of it. It's really delicious, and all of these flavors are going to go really so well together. So let's tuck them on there. And you'll notice I'm not going to add any oil to this because, of course, as that pork cooks, it's going to render some of that fat, and it is going to have a ton of oil anyways. So now that our bed of fennel and onions and apples are ready, we are going to prep the pork. So the first thing I want to do is score the top of that fat, that beautiful fat layer on top. In the end, you want something that's crispy and delicious and adds a lot of texture to the roasted pork. So we're going to score it with an X-Acto knife. Now, some of us might not have knives at home that are particularly sharp. So this is a great tip to use to make sure that it scores the pork perfectly. Now, of course, if you don't have one just for kitchen use, you want to make sure you crack that top blade off and give yourself a fresh blade. Okay, so we're going to start here. Some people like to cut in cross-hatch sections, but I'm just going to go down in strips, which will make it easier for me to portion out at the end because everybody wants a piece of that crackling, trust me. All right, so we're going to take our knife, and I'm just going to start here in the center, and I'm going to just hold that skin taut and then cut right into it. You have to add a little bit of pressure because, as you can imagine, that's quite thick. So there you go. You can see how easy that blade cut through the pork, and I am just going to continue on in that fashion in about maybe 1/2 inch strips until the entire thing is done. Now, a little tip that will allow your skin to be a little bit firmer. If you have the time, you can actually put your pork belly in the fridge on a roasting pan or on a baking sheet uncovered overnight, and that'll help dry the surface out, and it'll be a lot easier to score, and it'll be a lot easier to crisp up. Okay, so now that we have our scores, just want to make sure it's scored all the way through. Sometimes you have to go back and just take a quick peek to make sure that it's done its job. We are going to season this up. Now, the way I cook it, I don't want to add a lot of seasonings, dried spices and herbs at the beginning because they will burn and become black. I'm going to simply season it up with some salt and pepper. So we're going to use probably about 1 teaspoon to 2 teaspoons of salt. And we're just going to start by seasoning it from up above. And then I'm going to go in with some freshly cracked black pepper, quite a bit, probably about a teaspoon as well. And then what I want to do is I really want to get it in to those slits that we've created to season it really, really well. Now, I'm not going to season it with anything else because this pork, when it's cooked, it's so unctuous and juicy, and it has a beautiful flavor all on its own. So now that it's seasoned up, we're going to pop it right onto our tray of veg, and this is going to go into a very hot oven. Now, there are a couple ways you can do this. The way that I prefer to do it is to start it at a really high heat. We're going to go 425 degrees for about 1.5 hours. That will begin the rendering process of all that fat and begin to crisp up that outer fat layer. Then I'm going to take the heat down to really low to about 300 degrees and let it go for another 2 to 2.5 hours. All right, so let's get this in the oven. Okay, so we're going to put this right in the oven. One last thing I want to do, because this pan is going to become very hot, is I want to add about 1 cup of water to the bottom of this pan so the sugars from the apples and the fennel don't burn and over caramelize. All right, so we're going to get that in there for 1.5 hours. Okay, so it's been 1.5 hours at 425. We're going to take it out and have a look at it, and then we're going to turn the temperature down. Wow, look at that. I wish you guys could smell it. It is so delicious. Now, I want to show you just how, can you hear that? Crispy that pork skin is. It's going to make delicious crackling. What I want to do is I just want to move this off to the side slightly, and I'm going to move the apples and the onions out from underneath it because I want to sit the bottom of the pork right down in those juices to continue cooking. That way the meat will stay nice and juicy and tender. Now, because we're turning down the heat to 300 degrees, we don't have to worry too much about those veg and apples burning. I think we have enough liquid on there. But if you had no liquid on there, you might want to add a little bit more. All right, so here we go. Let's turn the oven down to 300. And we will put that timer on for another, let's say 2 hours. And we'll pop this right back in to finish cooking. There it goes. See you in a while. Okay, so the pork belly has now been in for 2 hours at 300 degrees. And you can see just how beautiful and brown the onions and fennel and apple have become and all those juices. There is a lot of fat there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to strain the juices off. Let me see if I can touch this, yeah. Into a measuring cup because we are going to use those for something delicious. Look at how gorgeous they are. Tons and tons of flavor, but of course there's lots of fat in there as well. So what I'm going to do once I drain all that liquid off is to skim some of the fat off the top and then use the drippings below. Perfect. Okay, that looks good. Next up, I am going to take all of those bits and bobs, the fennel, look at how gorgeous and caramelized and dark brown that is. I'm gonna take those, there's some onion, and I'm gonna chop them up because we can definitely serve those pieces with the pork. It'll add a ton of flavor. And look at that beautiful fennel. It's nice and sweet now. And we're just going to give it a rough chop. I'm telling you, it doesn't look like much, but this is packed full of flavor. And we're just gonna pop those in a bowl. And we're gonna get ready to take some of that fat off that beautiful jus. So we're just going to use a spoon to skim the top of that. If you happen to have one of those things in your arsenal that separates the fat, use that. But I just want to show you, oops, you see all that brown, delicious goodness underneath? You want to try to keep as much of that as possible. And we're going to get rid of that fat. Of course, that is pork fat, which does beautiful things to potatoes and vegetables when you roast them. So you can absolutely keep this for your Sunday roast or for your morning potatoes. We've got our veg cut up, we've got our jus all skimmed. Now, because this is a fairly large piece, I'm gonna actually cut it right in half. And for me, the serrated knife is a must. So it's nice if you have a glove or something if you wanna hold on to this, but I'm just gonna go ahead and use my hands and we're gonna cut right into that. Look at how tender that beautiful pork is. Look how juicy it is. Oh my gosh, look at those juices coming out. That crackling. Guys, this is a showstopper. Okay, so we're gonna cut this piece. Oh my gosh, this might be a thick piece, but look at this. Who wouldn't want to tuck into that juiciness? The fat is all broke down. It's soft and buttery. Let's do another one. On this end, you can see how those score lines are really helping me to saw through that crispy crackling for beautiful, beautiful pork pieces. Guys, let's plate it up. With that tender pork, we're going to add some of those veg on the side. Of course, some mashed potato would be great with that, but those veg are chocked full of flavor. And then of course, last but certainly not least, a little bit of that jus. Guys, it's time for me to give it a try. Beautifully tender, that crackling is everything. Here we go. Let's get some of that veg in there. Pork belly roasted, mostly unattended, gives you an unctuous, delicious piece of meat to share with your friends. You should try this recipe.